Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you to the Upbit team for hosting the event and inviting Helium to join and share a little bit about what's happening in our space. So Helium was one of the pioneers in the space of leveraging blockchains in terms of the proof for physical work, also being referred to lately as token incentive models for physical infrastructure. So backing up, let me tell you a little bit about, Helium Network was originally conceived back in 2013 with the goal of creating solutions for Internet of Things products or smart devices. So think about, small sensors that are really looking to, share small bits of data and information, more around things of, whether devices are on, off, warm, cold. A lot of Internet of Things products tended to rely on Wi-Fi networks, and deployments out in the field lacked really robust networks in order to properly scale. So the original team founding the network was working on a number of different centralized solutions around this, and actually was not a blockchain project from the inception. Fast forward years later, actually leveraging blockchain to bring the incentive model in allowed the community to scale significantly faster with a focus on how can you actually propagate wireless coverage out to a community through a token incentive model. So originally, the focus was completely on Internet of Things devices and small sensors, and propagating a LoRaWAN network, so long-range, low-power network, which is again a wireless standard that is something that was created prior to Helium, and it was really where we could start to solve for IoT connectivity worldwide in a community-built network. So since launching on mainnet in 2019, I've grown significantly since then. So, in 3 years, we are now nearly at 1 million hotspots. That spans across predominantly the IoT side of the network. I'll talk a little bit more about how we've expanded to support other wireless standards, including broadband cellular. Fairly global coverage in terms of 72,000 cities and across 182 countries, predominantly North America, Europe, although we are seeing significant growth in Southeast Asia as well as in Australia. What we're able to do through the network is, transferring data at a significantly reduced rate compared to some of the incumbent carriers who rely on heavy investment and large capital expenditure to deploy out towers, find real estate locations, funding, deployment specialists, whereby we are able to do this at a significantly reduced cost where the community owns the network and is actually setting up the site themselves and providing coverage in their neighborhoods. So we're seeing incredible agency from individuals, small communities, and really incredible how we've seen amazing organic growth across the community. What we've also been able to do is, as active participants in the LoRaWAN ecosystem, including the Helium Foundation being members of the LoRaWAN Alliance, we can work with existing devices that can be compatible and dump right onto the Helium network. And it's very simple for onboarding and using what's existing coverage around the world. There's no subscription costs. It's very simply a model whereby anyone who is looking to deploy a device is burning Helium tokens to acquire data credits. Those are effectively, think of them as a proprietary stablecoin on the Helium network that is fixed to a US dollar rate. So Helium tokens are burned to create data credits, and data credits are effectively spent down to deploy devices in the network and transfer data. And this has worked incredibly well over the last 3 years since launching on mainnet, where initially only 200 hotspots. We launched in Austin, Texas, and incredible growth since then, where really as we started to open up to third-party manufacturing partners coming into our ecosystem, the original Helium Systems Inc., now Nova Labs, was the original creator of the hotspot. We opened up a third-party manufacturer program through a proposal that was called HIP 19, so Helium Improvement Proposal number 19, to invite in third-party manufacturers. We now have nearly, I believe, 36 manufacturers participating in the network and selling hotspots out. So certainly have moved towards a very decentralized model of hardware manufacturing providers, as well as working with distributed partners to sell around the world. Since we have onboarded that program, the ability for users to acquire and deploy those hotspots has grown significantly. So we also have worked consistently with LoRaWAN network operators. So again, these are more of the traditional centralized operators who have been running their own networks for LoRaWAN coverage, and working closely with them so they can actually roam onto Helium coverage for smaller cost than deploying the own infrastructure themselves. So not only has our community been able to deploy their own solutions, and we've seen a number of applications running on top of the network, but working with partners who might have otherwise seen us as competition historically now see us as a complementary solution to their own networks and their own enterprise services. And then LoRaWAN really supports a number of different use cases across a whole variety of industries. You know, smart buildings, smart cities, smart agriculture are some of the buzzwords that are typically used in this space. So if you think about some of the solutions used by municipalities around water metering, as an example, air quality sensors, parking meters, we actually do have a literal better mousetrap has been built and is running on top of the Helium network. So the idea that commercial real estate operators are able to deploy a number of different mousetraps using smart sensors. So rather than using manpower to actually check and monitor these things manually and highly inefficient, they're able to run different types of programs throughout their operations. So again, water metering being a very large example of this. Asset tracking is a very significant case in LoRaWAN, so significantly cheaper than running tracking over a cellular network. You're talking about a fraction of the cost, as it's small bits of data that are being sent over LoRaWAN. So whether that is inventory tracking, temperature management and monitoring, number of different cases we're seeing, and certainly been engaging with different municipalities within the U.S. and overseas, testing various solutions, and have certainly seen a lot of success working with some of the incumbent network operators as well. On top of that, now the city of San Jose has a significant coverage in the LoRaWAN network. So to the degree that they can develop things in terms of smart manhole covers, again, air quality sensors, water metering, a number of things that benefit ability for the city to run more efficiently, more economically viable solutions, and better spend manpower for city services. And I alluded to this earlier, but one of the big points where we've seen adoption of the Helium network is for existing wireless operators focused on IoT services. Again, considering the fact of the capital expenditure deploying out this coverage from a centralized model, it's a lot more advantageous to leverage a community-driven model through Helium. So we have seen multiple large network operators who have been working directly with our teams to expand their coverage to roaming, significantly reducing cost, perpetuating the LoRaWAN standard, and we're starting to see a lot more development and innovation happening across the entire industry. So Senate, Actilia, Tectena, some organizations, and again, our ability to combine coverage across a single wireless standard, supporting these large operators, we're certainly seeing some real fantastic use cases in the real world where a blockchain-powered, community-driven network can certainly help the incumbents in the industry perpetuate better coverage. So one of the most exciting developments in Helium is this concept of network of networks. And again, as I've been speaking for the last few minutes around our focus on LoRaWAN and Internet of Things, smart device connectivity, we had a team that came to us sometime in late 2020, early 21, a team called FreedomFi. They'd been working on the idea of how can you leverage open spectrum for cellular broadband to create better cellular connectivity. Given the success of Helium's incentive model, we began discussing the idea of how could we leverage our existing token model to build other types of wireless connectivity networks. So beyond LoRaWAN, beginning to focus much more on how we could build out coverage on different types of wireless standards. So working through our network of networks model, there was another improvement proposal, HIP 51, 52, and 53, 51 being the overarching architecture of how can we go from supporting a single type of wireless standard to supporting multiple. And this led to the idea of creating multiple tokens on top of the existing blockchain. So rather than HNT being the sole token for governing the chain and the incentive model, breaking that out into the different standards. So new IoT token, which will be coming soon, will become the primary governing token and utility token around the incentivizing LoRaWAN coverage, as we've been focused on for the last 3 years. Beginning in August 12th, we launched the mobile token to propagate coverage for cellular broadband. So we're currently in the genesis period of rewards to incentivize coverage. We have, I believe, nearly 5,000 hotspots that are out in the field, starting to build out our coverage for cellular broadband. This is exclusive to the US for the time being, given that the US is the only country that supports open use spectrum. However, we are beginning a number of discussions with overseas carriers and how we can consider spectrum access and start to think about how we can build cellular broadband networks overseas as well. Mobile was the first to go live on top of the Helium network, IoT coming soon, and we are also discussing how we can start to support other types of wireless standards, including Wi-Fi, coming in the near future. So while the initial focus was certainly serving an underserved market on IoT, the LoRaWAN standard, opening up to support multiple types of wireless standards, given the, again, capital expenditure has, I believe, for wireless broadband, for cellular broadband, it's eclipsing around $22 billion a year at this point. Our ability to propagate different types of wireless networks significantly opens up a lot more market opportunity for Helium and its community. Given the size of the cellular networks, we're also in discussions with decentralized VPN projects and looking at other types of ways that we can support wireless connectivity through our incentive model and our existing community of hundreds of thousands of operators around the world. So the idea with 5G, as I alluded to, is the US does have something that is called the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. The idea of how we could actually start to create cellular coverage using open spectrum. In a similar way of folks who were out buying a hotspot, being able to deploy IoT coverage from their home, from their office, allowing anybody to participate as an infrastructure provider. We're leveraging that same model. So the idea that you can go out and buy a 5G hotspot, attach a small cell radio to allow coverage in your area. That is now live, and we are excited to continue growing into that space. We had some commitments from a number of different telcos who were looking to roam onto Helium. And actually, as of just this week, which I did not have time to update my slides, apologies, we have announced, or Nova Labs rather, has announced the launch of Helium Mobile, which will be the first crypto-native cellular carrier in the US, relying on both Helium coverage from the community, as well as roaming onto T-Mobile's US network to provide complete service across the US and internationally. Now, for folks who are certainly familiar with the space or have worked in other venture-backed areas, building hardware is certainly hard, building blockchains is hard, and building mobile carriers is hard. So as we've been discussing between the core developers, the foundation team, and Nova Labs, considering changes to our overall infrastructure, as Helium is a sovereign layer one, so being able, requiring us to build everything effectively from scratch when so many other L1s have been building a lot of the tools, features, and composable developer tooling that allows other teams and applications to scale faster. So for the last several months, or arguably even over a year, the core developers have been considering the idea of whether Helium really needs to maintain its own layer one. Back when we first launched in 2019, there weren't this variety of options that there are today. So considering all the different layer ones and considering the needs of what we actually need to still operate on-chain versus off-chain, the core developers proposed HIP-70, the idea of actually moving Helium from its own layer 1 on top of the Solana network. That vote actually passed a little less than 24 hours ago, so represents one of the biggest changes to the network since its founding period, and arguably could be one of the largest layer 1 migrations across the entire blockchain industry. This brings significant advantages to the Helium community in the sense that for some of the challenges that we face from a developer perspective, in terms of how much we were running the entire consensus model originally on hotspots, that had moved to validators. All the compute that has been running through validators, and the idea that many transactions were getting stuck in state channels. The idea with HIP-70 is to move our proof of coverage model into an Oracle system, which we'll consider how we decentralize that model over time, as well as data transfer, removing this amount of chain bloat to the point that we can just run transactions and a system of accounts directly on a layer 1. Went through a long evaluation process, and ultimately Solana matched up across a number of different areas for our team. The ability to plug in much more quickly into a DeFi ecosystem, to have the composability across wallets, simpler integrations across different providers, working with various applications, and simply the fact that as a sovereign layer 1, we are missing smart contracts as a feature. The fact that our community had been looking for so many different things in terms of reward splitting across different hotspot hosts and the types of applications that can be built on a smart contract platform. Moving over to Solana enables a whole host of new applications and features that otherwise could have taken us a lot longer to build into our own layer 1. So in terms of being able to move at greater speed, access a much larger developer ecosystem, the fact that Solana is now launching its own mobile stack as well as its own phone, there's a lot of alignment in terms of culturally, business priorities. So we're very excited about this move and to be working a lot more with the larger Solana community. So very happy to take questions, talk a little bit more about anything that anybody has specific interests on, whether that is our focus on the IoT space, our move into broadband cellular, anything around the incentive model or the migration over. More than happy to take some questions and be a resource to your community.
Well, thank you very much, Scott, for your great presentation. Because we are a little bit behind the schedule, please understand that we will get audience questions on our online platform. Thank you very much. 네, 그러면 시간 관계상 질문은 플랫폼으로 받고 넘어가도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.